Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. Kyle and Joe here to talk to you about the recent Horizons NYC conference in 2017. And we got the opportunity to record with a bunch of folks too. So this will be a different kind of episode for us where we actually play about 4 to 6 minutes from individuals we spoke with out on the street outside the event. So Kyle, how did you enjoy the event?
I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a little less hectic than Psych Science, which was nice because I actually felt like I saw a lot more lectures and presentations. And well, I guess that's not true. I definitely hung out at the Symposium stage a whole bunch at Psych Science, but I loved it. I think Horizons is a great event to attend. It's really small and intimate, and yeah. How about you?
Yeah, I really loved it too. The fact that it was so small really helped out. So small, not being like 20 people. There's probably a few hundred. I don't know. What do you think? 300?
I was guessing probably around
Yeah.
three
So
more.
I feel like this year is a really heavy conference year. A transpersonal psychology conference. There's a bunch of like maybe 3 psychedelic conferences in Europe, plus the transpersonal psych conference. And psychedelic science plus Horizon. So really a tough, but really full year for psychedelic conferences. So I feel like that might have impacted the numbers a bit.
Yeah,
Um,
you had psychedelic science in April, breaking conventions. I forget when that was.
Midsummer.
Midsummer, and then yeah, Horizons, and then the Drug Policy
Yeah, Drug Policy
Alliance
Alliance conference
conference
is
is
this
going
weekend,
on now.
just the weekend after. We considered going, but that would have been a lot.
Yeah, and then you have the International Transpersonal Conference, and then there's another one coming up in Berlin called Altered Conference. So yeah, it's a really heavy conference season or year.
Yeah, I don't. Well, hopefully we can keep up this momentum, but I think next year is going to be slightly smaller because the transpersonal psychology conference and psychedelic science are every other year. So that's good. That'll help us get to Europe hopefully next year for some conferences.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was really grateful. Neil Goldsmith helped us out with tickets and welcomed us. It was really nice to meet him finally. And yeah, that Friday night event was really cool. It was kind of, you show up in this nice huge church. There's a cash bar, snacks for sale. There's a really cool pipe organ. So they had an organist playing. I felt like there was 3 different musical acts that would alternate by song
Mm.
almost. It was beautiful. Kind of an Indian sitar style band. I don't recall the third. I was too busy talking to everybody.
Yeah, I was outside actually most of the night. I didn't hang out in the church, which was fine because had great conversations with folks.
Yeah, I got to connect with Fan Rousseau, guest of the show. That was really fun on Friday night. Talked to a bunch of other old friends. Paul Austin was there. Got to chat with him. Um, yeah, it was just a really well put together event. It flowed really well. I like the way they do the kind of hard therapeutic science stuff on Saturdays, followed by um, kind of a more feminine plant approach. Maybe that's a way to put it on Sundays. Meaning talking about the actual plant traditions and medicine traditions as opposed to like what it looks like at Hopkins or something.
Yeah. What was one presentation that really stuck out for you while you were there?
Well, they were all really awesome. One thing that really got me fired up though was this lawyer that works for iSears. I forget his name. But he talked about helping out the movement by offering legal support for people trying to start psychedelic churches. And he gave some really interesting advice about, found it before you're in trouble. Found it as soon as possible. Get with a lawyer to help you put together the paperwork, and only use one plant per church. Otherwise, you're going to confuse the legal system. We're not really there yet for a multi-plant church. As valid as it might be, it's probably not the most efficient way to keep yourself out of jail, to mash up stuff and try to really go ahead of the curve.
Was that on Sunday?
That was, I don't recall. I think it was Sunday. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'm just looking at the schedule. Gardening the gates of heaven, protecting and cultivating the legality, health, and safety of sacred medicine. Is that
I
it?
believe that was it. Yeah.
By Rob Heffernan.
Um, yeah, I'm looking for my program too. That sounds right.
Cool.
Yeah, that was totally it. And it was really cool. I was kind of blown away going, okay, I think every state in the US has the ability to kind of, say you had 5 different plants, peyote, mushrooms, ayahuasca. Ayahuasca can be done like 4 different ways: Shipibo, mestizo. You could do it in the Christian syncretic way. So there's a bunch of different variants there. So really, you could attack each state in the US with like 5 or 10 different approaches to this stuff. You have to harken back to real authentic tradition. Just that's the way it works here. Like, you can't necessarily expect that they're going to say, okay, yeah, you just founded last year. That's totally cool. You're the leader. Great. Yep. Sure. Here's your license to use drugs in church. I don't think it's going to work that way. You have to harken back to real tradition and say, yep, I studied with these shamans or whatever. You definitely want to document your use practice. So yeah, very interesting stuff there. I think there's a lot of opportunity. I got really excited, kind of wanted to get involved. I was like, oh man, there's so many ways you could make this happen.
But starting like your own church.
Well, yeah, like I maybe like helping groups do that, like kind of incubating churches almost, because the real win there is that it's a harm reduction thing,
right?
And why is it necessarily the case that to get ibogaine treatment you need to go to a clinical setting? Like, why not use it in a traditional setting? I feel like that is a huge boon to the US. Like, we're dealing with this kind of drug war situation in a weird way. I've been thinking about this a bunch, and it's possibly the case that China's doing drug war against the US with the fentanyl push, and it could be an organized way thing. There was an article in Newsweek I read years ago about like the 9-prong approach to doing war with the US from China, and they were tracking like everything and they broke down each one. So to me, it doesn't seem like conspiracy that that this could be happening. It seems like a very possible thing. The British did it to the Chinese,
right? I was going to say with the opium wars, right?
Yeah. Why would the Chinese not want to do it back? Like, especially if it's in the interest of China and power in China. So
I'm reading this book for class. It's like when the spirit catches you, you fall, or when you fall, the spirit catches you, something like that, by this author Anne Fadiman. But it's about these refugees from Laos. But in some of the later chapters, she talks about how they got over there, and a lot of it was about like there's some I don't remember in full detail, but just how they were being pushed out, and then some of those governments were using like the heroin trade and stuff like that during like Vietnam, and it was just really crazy to think about that. Maybe these systems do kind of put drugs in place for control and whatnot.
Yeah, and it plays a huge part in the global economy. Drugs and the global economy are inextricably linked. I was watching some show the other day, and they were arguing that the narco dollars, the narconomy, was the thing that helped the U.S. through the recession. People still had to get their lawns mowed, cars fixed, all that kind of stuff, and that maybe kept the gears rolling, which is fascinating to think that. Because people are always going to buy drugs. They're not, ran out of money this year. Definitely not going to buy weed this year. Maybe next quarter, that kind of thing. But yeah, it was just fascinating to me that there are people working this legal angle, and the legal angle isn't as inaccessible as we initially thought.
Right. I mean, there's definitely been some people that started up cannabis churches. Which
there was actually one in Denver founded recently with the huge, like, psychedelically colored interior. I definitely should check it out and report back.
Yeah.
But yeah, this thing is here. If you don't care about the religious angle, that's fine, but think that the religious angle does allow access and does give people therapeutic services.
Yeah, there's this huge thing going on right now with Soul Quest, is an ayahuasca church down in
Yeah.
Orlando, because they're trying to get the like a DEA license and try to get the Religious Freedom Act for that, so people can come down and use it. So yeah, it's interesting to think about how you could go about using sacred sacraments within a religious context, and that it could be, you could do that. It just probably lots of loops to jump through.
And Nick Powers, who's I think an English professor, literature professor at one of the state universities in New York, I think on Long Island. He's going to be a guest on the show in the near future, we hope. His whole thing on race and psychedelics and inclusion was really powerful to me. Typically, I'm not hearing about race issues from the right people for it to work for me. I just don't know that their arguments are structured well enough for where it clicks for me, but it really clicked for me with Nick, and talking about how there's this dual consciousness in Black people. Like, yes, you're there in the room, but you're also not being seen. Like, how that's very traumatic, how just racial bias on people is really traumatic. I thought that was really important and kind of amazing. And then, how can we kind of heal some of those gaps? There's a couple of ways, like start your own kind of, Black Burning Man or Spanish Burning Man or something, or, just invite your minority friends to burner events. And then there's also this gap that we saw about, so I'm kind of two minds of this. We talked about it on the show before. Like, on one hand, we're just trying to do, the best quote unquote science we can to get these drugs medically prescribable, and it's not what I consider to be therapy. It's not like, this is research. Yes, it is therapy, but it's also just plain research, and we're trying our best to get this through and make it make the funds that we have work and stretch till 2021 when we have this stuff prescribable. Also, on the other hand, there's a lot of people that need this therapy. The African American community hasn't really been engaged at all on this on these studies, and is it a matter of bias of the researchers recruiting in a kind of a biased way? Who knows? Is it that it's too expensive to pay somebody a day rate so they don't have to miss work, or are you not engaging nonviolent prison populations to maybe decrease recidivism from offenses, from all over the place, like theft or just, drug dealing? Like, oh, you're a crack dealer, you've been in jail 3 times. Do you really want to go back? Like, let's talk about this and maybe do some therapy there to see if you can decrease those numbers.
That'd be interesting to, do it within like the prison system. Because I think, money is definitely a huge thing. And we've talked about this before on the show, like time taking off of work. During a training, somebody brought up the point that possibly like those minority communities don't really trust, say, the white community and science, because we've kind of done some sketchy things in the past in regards to research, so there might also be that fear there as well. It's like, what are they really trying to do? They're just giving us drugs. Like, what does that really mean? I don't know. That was just somebody threw that out at a training one time, and
it was actually raised in the event too.
Oh, was it?
Q&A session. Yeah, there's a long history of this. Canada is not innocent either. The U.S. and Canada had a long-standing thing about forced sterilization of a lot of populations that we considered undesirable or something, which is pretty messed up. Drug testing also. Like, I think we had a fair amount of crazy and unethical drug testing in Africa itself, probably also in poor populations in the U.S.
Yeah, I think the one famous one was Tuscanini. I forget.
Tuskegee.
Yeah. That they're like injecting the community with like syphilis, right? To try and test out the vaccines, or just this experiment. Yeah. So I mean, Ugh,
And that was a 40-year span, 32 to 72.
jeez.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of forced sterilization in that one. It's like as soon as you show up with a disease to the doctor, they're like, okay, yeah, we're going to put you on this list and sterilize you against your will without you knowing. Um, so there's a lot of crazy stuff like that. And yeah, thankfully, the African American community knows about it. The white community doesn't really know very much about it, unfortunately.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, we have to be aware of our. Yeah, I hate to say it's our ancestors' crimes,
Hmm.
and say like, does that impact how we're relating to people and what stories we can and can't tell or need to tell in order to heal those wounds or be more inclusive or something. Yeah, so I'm definitely of two minds. Like I'm not mad at MAPS about this, but I do think like we could maybe do a better job recruiting from populations for phase 3, um, so it's not just a homogenous population.
Hmm. Yeah, it'd be interesting how to go about that. Because if it is money, maybe it's just like you raise a lot more funds to help
Yeah,
give them a little cushion and comfort without having to worry about taking off of work or whatever that is.
so I'm sure we'll get into it with Nick Powers, Dr. Nick Powers, when we get him on the show. Um, but how about for you, Kyle? What kind of stuff was awesome for you there?
Let's see. Looking back at the schedule, so the ones that stuck out for me that I saw, obviously like with Shannon Carlin, who was on our show, she was giving updates about MDMA therapy, the breakthrough status that the FDA granted to MAPS, and also talking about uh, the training. So she was saying that they're probably going to open up a new training group in 2019, and hopefully, if they get approved for expanded access, this will open up a lot more people to get trained and to participate in these studies. But that was exciting to hear that, because right now the groups are kind of closed off to phase 3 sites, and so it's really not too open, the training groups. So I think in 2019 they're going to open that back up and hopefully have a lot more people trained for MDMA therapy. So her talk was just really exciting to get some updates on where this is going, and just some of the updates. And it's really exciting about the breakthrough status. It's huge. I didn't get to sit in on Michael Bogenschutz or Holly Dwayne's talk on alcohol dependence and psilocybin. I caught like the tail end, but Joe and I actually had a really cool experience doing breathwork with them. So I got to talk with them a little bit over the weekend about that. Um, but yeah, it seems like they're doing some cool stuff at NYU and helping to treat people with alcohol dependence. And I think that somebody told me they're still having trouble getting participants. So
Mm-hmm.
if you have an alcohol dependency, go check them out, because they're still looking for people, and they're in the New York City
And
area.
the qualifications for heavy drinking is really low. Like to be like most Americans, I think would qualify for their criteria for over drinking. And yeah, so the major thing there, Kyle, was like it's very helpful, obviously, this kind of therapy. And then they weren't totally clear which was the placebo and which wasn't.
Hmm.
And they also, like you've raised a number of times in the show, talked about dose not necessarily being a predictor of the intensity of the experience. And the other thing they did was they brought a lot of humanity to the data they presented by like presenting individual cases.
Yeah, that
And
was wonderful.
yeah, just that. I think they did like 3 or 4.
Hmm.
It was killer. I really appreciated that.
Yeah. I also appreciated Elizabeth Nilsson's talk. It was titled "What Psychedelics Don't Talk About and Why: The Case for Research on Firsthand Experience with Psychedelics." So she kind of just went over the history of psychedelic research and talking about the early days when LSD was discovered, and people like Stan Groff and those people that were exposed to it early on actually had a lot of firsthand experience with these substances to really understand how they work, what the experience is like, and using it almost as a training tool for psychologists and psychiatrists to understand maybe how the mind works and maybe understand what's going on inside a patient's psyche. So it was kind of cool to talk about that because, yeah, a lot of people don't talk about their firsthand experience. And I think it's hard for researchers and people in academia and science to come out of the closet and talk about this stuff. You know, I think if I didn't have this show, and I know I debated it a bunch of times to really say, should I be talking about this stuff, since I'm kind of just, going through grad school and, I'm in search for different things, like practicums or jobs afterwards. And like, will this, if people decided to take a listen and hear about me talking about like DMTX and or my experiences with psilocybin, like, is that really going to affect jobs in the future? So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, personally, like if I was somebody going through this research, like I would definitely want a therapist that's been there before. Like I wouldn't want a therapist that just is examining it from like an outside lens, never having the experience. Because I mean, I don't know, that would frighten me if something really difficult came up and the person sitting there really didn't know how to deal with it.
Yeah, that would be a little crazy. I think that's why the breathwork training is so good, because you get a lot of time to do your own work. It helps you figure out what's projection, what isn't projection, how to deal with very extreme states that can pop up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're right.
But on the flip side, it's also kind of cool to not have any experience with it, so you don't have that bias as well. Like if you are doing research, and so I mean, I guess it would be cool to just have maybe somebody with personal experience, somebody with no experience, so you can kind of gauge in the middle there. Yeah.
You mean in terms of structuring a study or for individual therapy?
For study, I think for like if it was therapy, I'd probably want somebody there that's been there before. But at the symposium event, Sophia Korb said she had no experience with these, and she started doing some of that research with microdosing and working with Fadiman. And I thought that was interesting. It's like, wow, no experience, and just kind of I guess she called herself like psychedelic naive when she started getting involved, which, I think it's good from like a research perspective to, kind of be a little naive, so you don't have all these expectations or biases going in.
It sounded like they recruited her because of that.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine now she's been around for a while that she's no longer naive.
Yeah.
But you never know. Yeah. I think people would be surprised by how little use you and I do.
Yeah.
Doing this show. So I think I was also really surprised by this anthropologist talking about the Huichol people.
Yes, that was a really great talk.
Stacy Schaefer. Yeah. She's at University of California at Chico, and she's also doing anthropology on the Humboldt County pot farms, which is hilarious and very interesting, because that's quite the strange subculture, relative to the rest of America. So back to the Huichol part, the fact that they're using peyote throughout the pregnancy cycle. So the infant's being exposed quite regularly to mescaline, and how those people have like this many generations of that use, and no real negative biological stuff has been found. They've definitely tested for it.
Yeah, that was so fascinating to listen to, because coming from like our culture, we would think that was like harm. It'd probably call like the Department of Child Abuse or something like that, of children and families, being like, "What are you doing? You're eating peyote while you're pregnant? Like, what the fuck?" But yeah, it didn't seem like they had any. I think. Oh, wait, I took some notes, but they were talking about like actually like healthy brain development, which was really interesting. Peyote might have stimulating effects on the baby, could impact like neural pathways of the baby, like in utero and whatnot. So could also maybe help with like some cognitive function, which is interesting, or just like brain plasticity and growing new pathways. Um,
I hadn't heard it talked about before, but Amanda Fielding raised that there was a early theory about how psychedelics operate in general, being that they increase blood circulation
hmm,
in a lot of places. So an increase in circulation could mean an increase in growth. I don't know that that's proven yet, but
yeah.
or just health in general. Like for instance, one of the reasons my arms are injured is because they were injured in a site that has a really low vascularity. There's no real major blood flow over like um, those zones. So it takes a lot longer to heal. But if you could increase that blood flow, maybe health would come back to it because you're just
Yeah,
throwing fresh blood cells at it.
that's interesting. When I was going through some physical therapy, they were saying the same thing, like, oh, you have really good blood flow to that section. That's really good. It's going to heal your scar tissue and whatnot.
Yeah, certain body parts have it, some don't. Um, the brain's super complicated, and like I think we're just kind of now grappling with like how to optimize brain health, and a lot of it has to do with sleeping appropriately, having appropriate diet, not too much inflammatory food, not too much anti-inflammatory food. And your
Mhm.
body kind of has this like way to just kind of cycle out waste, especially when you're sleeping.
Mm. Yeah.
So after you sleep, you have more efficient brain health and
Hmm.
more efficient cognitive function, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not stating things as certainties here. It's just like this is a possible mechanism, probably needs to be checked out.
Yeah. Yeah. Her talk was really interesting. Something else that I thought was kind of cool was that, she was saying the Huichol women will take small doses during labor, help stop bleeding. And it kind of goes back to Albert Hoffman's discovery in the sense of working with ergot early on to help stop bleeding and for labor. So yeah, it seems like these medicines have similar effects. It was kind of funny how she was saying if a baby starts eating a lot of peyote, the parents don't necessarily stop the child. They just think that it's the child's going to grow up to be a shaman, and so they are like, yeah, okay, or they would give like a or if the woman, the mother is eating a lot of peyote, and the it goes through the breast milk, and then the little baby might just sit there and stare off at space a little bit, and so yeah, it's interesting, like different like cultural beliefs and narratives.
Yeah, and that area needs to be expanded on too, because we know for sure that ayahuasca is given in kind of micro doses to newborns in those traditions. Some of those traditions, not all of them. I
Hmm.
think mainly the Christian ones, but I don't know enough about mestizo shipibo kind of stuff there to really comment on those. It makes me curious about the mushroom cultures,
Mm.
if they do it too.
Yeah, I don't know.
So we didn't get to talk about the after party, the microdosing after party, which was phenomenal. We only have a minute to talk about it, but I had a great time. There's a lot of build up. It was almost like two uh, fighters kind of, going back and forth on Twitter or something, trying to build up the excitement for it. But it actually worked out really amicably, and there's a lot of common ground found on the microdosing subject. There are potential risks related to thickening of heart valve. We don't know it for sure, but we need to look at it. I think in terms of microdosing, that's probably the one thing we really need to look at and be sure of. There's also the chance that this heart valve thing could impact the rest of the psychedelic movement too.
That was actually in a paper by David Nichols, and I actually took out a lot of that information when we were creating the course, and I wanted to put it in there, but I felt like I didn't understand it enough to explain it. So it's interesting that that's finally coming out, and people came across that research. Yeah, it's something with the 2B receptor and how it can thicken some of these
Right.
muscles in the heart, I believe, right?
Yeah, it was the actual valve.
Yeah.
So 5-HT2B receptor sites having an impact on heart valve thickness. which I don't understand cardiac health enough, but I imagine if the valve gets too thick, it's going to have diminished function.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, so something to check out. I'm not super worried about it. Amanda Fielding was not worried about it. She's like, no, I was, in my world, I was microdosing all the time, but I was really taking huge doses all the time. It just felt like a microdose because I was at that point.
Well, it'd be interesting to look at some of these cultures that use mushrooms all the time or drink ayahuasca all the time, because it probably has similar effects.
So how would we do that? We could maybe do like MRI or fMRI or something on a heart, or an ultrasound on a heart. Like, I don't really know how imaging works.
I don't know either.
Maybe you would do like a bunch of 60-year-olds that have never done psychedelics and a bunch of them that have, like, I don't know, 40 of each. And then
look at their heart health or something. I don't know.
Like if you can gauge heart valve thickness. I don't know how you can do that. Maybe you have to hook them up on those crazy machines. They're like testing your pulmonary and cardiac function. So you've seen that, right? They like hook you up with a breather and they put you on this crazy treadmill or an elliptical.
Yeah.
And make you really go, like, maybe that's the move. I don't really know for sure, but I think there's room there for a new study. Graduate students, go at it. I'm sure there's plenty of ex-hippies that did plenty of LSD in your college area to access, and plenty of drug naive ones too. Maybe they drank too much whiskey, but I don't know. That's going to be a tricky thing, because if you didn't do a lot of psychedelics, there's a good chance you're a heavy drinker. I don't know. It's a possibility.
There's so many variables in that.
Yeah.
I don't know if like bad
Michael
eating
Pollan
habits
had this. Michael Pollan had this study that he cited in a TV show he did recently about Seventh-day Adventists, how they're like lifelong vegetarians and non-drinkers, and how they're really, what's the way to put it? They're a subset of people that live really long, like people in that religion. And it crosses racial boundaries too. It's not just an all-white movement or all-black movement. It's like, that could be a nice sample set for studies.
Yeah. But yeah, symposium event was awesome.
Yeah.
Really great conversation. And as social media didn't get too out of hand, even though everybody was kind of beefing it up to be, but really great conversation. I think everybody took a really professional approach and really respected each other's opinions. And I had a wonderful time. I'm really excited to watch it wherever they put that production. Or I know you can, if you do want to watch it, I know they have it up on Symposia's Patreon page. But,
oh, great. Yeah, Duncan was hilarious. Adam Strauss is hilarious. Duncan's use of the term slurping back LSD or slurping back too many Chiba Chews almost killed me. Yeah, and he confronted Paul once or twice going, once in a while you think you're doing a microdose, but stuff gets a little slippery. He's like, no, I don't know what you mean. You know what I mean, man. So I thought that was great.
I didn't know what he meant. I thought like,
oh, the shit gets away from you. You ate too much. Yeah. You didn't know you ate too much, and stuff gets a little trippy when you don't expect it to be trippy. You're in a quarterly business review with your manager, and all of a sudden, the table moves a little bit, and you're oh shit.
Yep.
I got 2 hours left of this meeting. Hopefully, I can get through it. That kind of thing. So that's that is a risk with microdosing. You took too much, and you might put your employment at risk or safety at risk, because the odds are good you drove to work. So that's not great.
Yeah.
So, this is, stuff we got to talk about.
Definitely.
Cool, man. I think that's good for the intro. Let's maybe throw out some stuff about our Patreon. So we launched a Patreon recently. We've got a few donations. We have Dr. Matt Brown was a recent donor. Really, thank you, Matt. Really appreciate that. Looking forward to having you on as a guest to the show soon as well. Who else do we have on here?
I think just it was Matt and Gabe.
Oh yeah, Gabe. Gabe, you're the best. Thank you. Really appreciate you.
And Chris from Wizard of Monadnock.
Oh man, we're racking them up. Yeah, and I had a recent interview with Chris over there. It was super fun. We talked politics, psychedelics, the occult, all that kind of fun stuff. And that was really great. So check that out, Wizard of Monadnock.
And we're actually recording this video as the intro, and we're going to throw it up on Patreon. So if you want to see Joe and me talk about this stuff in person, it will be up there.
Yeah, absolutely. And what else? We have a shop. We're selling mugs, T-shirts, stickers, some other stuff like pillows and stuff. But whatever we could put our logo on and didn't cost us too much money to do. We have all sorts of stuff. The Spaceman, the Spore. If you want to see it on anything in particular, or maybe you have some art that you wouldn't mind donating to us to use for stuff, let us know. Reach out. Psychedelics Today, email at gmail.com. And
reviews too.
Reviews.
Yeah. If you're on iTunes or anywhere, just leave us a review. It definitely helps out on the iTunes store.
Facebook too. Yeah. So thanks all for listening. I hope you guys enjoy this series of interviews. And let us know what you think. Psychedelics Today, email at gmail.com. Take care.